Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Brigadier General Paul Fredenberg, U.S. Army, retired, Executive Vice President for Defense and National Security, AFCEA International.
All right, how's everybody doing today? Made it through lunch? Good, all right, so we're in the peak of the afternoon here, but we got a very important topic. Let me tell you, there's plenty of seats here, so if you're waiting to go to the cyber workforce panel, come on in and join us. It's a critical topic that needs some discussion. So it's my pleasure this morning to introduce our moderator, Captain Glenn Hernandez, U.S. Coast Guard retired, and a senior consultant at OpEdge Solutions. Glenn retired back in 2017 following a 26 career in our Coast Guard. While in the Coast Guard, as the Chief Information Security Officer, he co-authored the Coast Guard cybersecurity strategy and led the Coast Guard's first ever cyber crisis response based on a National Incident Management System framework. And he's been a member of AFCEA for quite some time, since 2018, and he leads our Zero Trust and our workforce subcommittees. Believe me, he's a wealth of knowledge, he's a man of action, and I know he's got a fantastic panel here for you today. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Glenn Hernandez and this astute panel to the stage.
So I just want to add, when I graduated from the Coast Guard Academy, one of the first things I got with my graduation certificate was an AFCEA student membership. And so that started my journey back in 1990 with regards to AFCEA. Thank you all for joining in today. And if you had the opportunity to listen to the panels today, right, you know that people is a major component of what we do. It transcends cyber technology, and it's really true with the opportunity you get to hear from our speakers today. And what we have is a real spectrum of perspectives. Right? You'll have from the policy, from DoD, you'll have down to the training center level, and you'll have down to the instructor level. And I invite your questions to come in. Ask me, tncyber@gmail is the email. If you want to get in your questions, please send to that email, and be happy to get to your questions. Now the panel, hacking the cyber workforce paradox. We know it's a problem. It's difficult. How do you get those unicorns out there if there's just not enough of them? There's competing constraints to get the resources that everyone needs. So what do we do? Your panelists today are going to give you some insight. I want you to take away some calls to action that you can bring to your organizations and to your communities after we depart. And I just want to thank the panelists for being here today. And I'm going to introduce them one at a time. And so the first one up is Mark Gorick from DoD CIO's office.
Thank you, Glenn. And thank you, Paul, for the introduction. Again, Mark Gorick, DoD CIO. One of my challenges in my performance is the workforce. So let me put a number out there, 30,000. It's a very large number or very small number if you look at the debt, but 30,000. Anybody know what that number is? Besides those who attend my last session? What is it? That's the number of job openings DoD currently has in the cybersecurity and IT workforce, 30,000. Our total workforce is about 225,000. So Houston, we have a problem. And this problem over time has not gotten better. We've had strategies, we've had policies, we've had direct hiring authority, we have cyber accepted service, and we're still lagging. So what I want to focus on in this panel is, what are we going to do about that? What new policies, what new procedures, what new programs, what new ways of doing business can we do to fix our problem? So with that, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Appreciate it.
That was already on.
I'll just keep pushing the button 100 times. Keep you all entertained before you go to the reception in an hour after listening us wax eloquently on a panel. Hey, look, so I am the commanding general of the Cyber Center of Excellence at Fort Gordon, Georgia. And I'm tasked with educating and training our warfighters and leaders to operate, attack, defend, and influence in the cyberspace. This microphone is awesome. Warfighting domain. Hey, so I think my opening comment is you can't fake the funk. If you don't have technical competency, you can't do the job. Basta. That's it. Stop. So that's a huge challenge for us to ensure that those that demonstrate potential when they enlist or commission into the Army actually can be developed into the soldiers and leaders that have the technical competency to execute effectively in the domain. As an infantry platoon leader, you get your platoon lost in the woods, they won't follow you anymore. As a cyber warfighting professional, you have to demonstrate your competency to earn the respect of the workforce that is tasked with following you. You can't do that if you don't have the educational foundation. You have to understand the fundamentals. But increasingly, what we're seeing is that the fundamentals are just that. That's the baseline. Now, how are you, as a practitioner, as an executor of operations, going to remain current with the changes in technology that are presented and leveraged by our enemies and by technological capabilities that we're putting into our own operating environment? If you enlisted as a signal soldier 3 years ago, the kit that you have in your formation today is not the same. It changes. What doesn't change is physics. A von Neumann architecture didn't change for the fundamentals of a compute system. If you understand that, then you can adjust to the changes in technology, the changes that our adversary presents. We had the benefit in the Army, based on the vision of our early leaders, to develop our branch early on and to develop a schoolhouse early on. A schoolhouse that was not overly burdened by legacy technology, by legacy think. So when we instituted our initial courses, we were objectives-based from the beginning. Not buttonology, not training, but education. You have to understand those educational foundation, the underpinnings. But you also have to be dynamic to adjust as the enemy and technology changes. Our cyber school instituted what we refer to as coursework as code. For those that actually know how to write code, we use Git. Not overly challenging, right? But the way that we execute training in the classroom, we don't change the major objective, but we do change how we impart that knowledge based off of what we're seeing evolve on a daily basis. Huge benefit from the partnership with Army Cyber Command that's co-located on Fort Gordon. We have the operational arm of the Army Cyber Forces and the institutional and educational arm living on the same base, which means that a warrant officer, a non-commissioned officer, a captain that just executed a mission literally lives across the street. So they come back into our classrooms having literally just executed mission and help teach and coach and mentor the students that are in class. And take the lessons that they learned, take the tools that they used on that particular mission and fit them into that coursework as code model so that we're constantly evolving with the times. Do we have it perfect? No. But it's a decent model, and we task every graduate of our courses, go off into the operational unit, and if you saw something in the course that didn't fit, guess what? It's coursework as code. We can adjust it based off of your insights that you feed back into the school. And so we're developing this pipeline of talent that reaches back into the institutional Army to help us continuously up our game. Because I'll go back to my opening point. You cannot fake the funk in this business. If you don't have technical depth, you can't do the mission. Thanks.
Thank you, General. Next up, we have General Terrence Adams from the Air Force.
Hello there. How y'all doing today? I'd like to start just by thanking AFCEA. AFCEA for their leadership and their, continuous presence to be able to bring people together, have these kind of conversations, focus on capability and also focus on the people. And so today we get a chance to talk about the workforce and to talk about people as well. So to General Lawrence and her leadership, we have Mr. Black here, retired Colonel Mike Black here as well. Just wanted to say thank you. And I see several AFCEA presidents, that are around from local chapters. So thank you all for being here and thank you for your partnership. I like my opening remarks to be about the challenges in some ways that we face in the Air Force. Many of them have been designed because I would say we have an identity crisis about what we're doing in the Air Force. Like, what is our value proposition to our service? Those things came because when cyber, the word, was introduced, I would say from an offense and defensive kind of standpoint, unlike the Army who separated, they kept their signal corps separate, we brought in the offense and defense kind of conversation together as one. And that has been a journey in some ways that I think we've struggled with, but in some ways that we've kind of defined ourselves. I work on the Air Staff, so I'm the Director of Cyber Operations and Warfighter Communications. And this journey, at least for the last, 12 or 14 months that I've been there, we are redefining our value proposition to the Air Force. And that's a very valuable thing that we've done so far. We started by having a cyber mission analysis sprint that we did in December of 2021, which led to the Secretary signing out a cyber mission analysis task order, about 70 task orders that we had to get at things in the workforce was one of our lines of efforts, roles and responsibilities in our line of efforts, and then also resourcing the things that we need. That led to we had a workforce summit. We went down to the FIG down in Montgomery, Alabama, and on the heels of that, we had a conversation with officers, civilians, and enlisted members to be able to determine what things should we be focused on in the future. 2 months later, we had a Tactical Edge Summit that had a conversation about what capability and what skill sets do we need to have to be able to deploy on the tactical edge with all of the equipment and the training that we need. And then we had two functional advisory councils that met to determine the future state for our workforce. Ms. Wanda Jones-Heath was a part of each one of those sessions that we had. And on today, we culminated that with we had a town hall yesterday, about 1,000 people in there with 100 questions from across the Air Force. Today, this morning, we had another town hall with about 800 people with about 90 questions. And I give you that journey to let you know that there are things that are changing in the Air Force, and we're doing that through partnership. Not all the best ideas come from the Pentagon. If you've been in the Pentagon, you should know that. And so what we've been doing is trying to deputize people across the force to be able to come up with those answers. And we've been using these virtual platforms to do that. And we're actually getting better answers and better solutions from that. And today was just that, another opportunity to touch base and to share information. And we received a lot of good feedback, some of them critical feedback about some things that we could be doing differently, but we're meeting those challenges. As I see all the technology and opportunities out there, today again is a focus on people. And I would say that our ability I use my leadership tenets of listen, lift, love, to be able to listen to the workforce. Many of the people in the workforce know much more than I do, right? Because some of them were born with some of the technology that we're talking about in their hands. But many times in the Pentagon, we are not changing what we think to address the needs of the workforce. It's almost like we think we have the right answer and we're not listening to people. And so the goal is, how do we do that? How do we bring those forces in? At the same time, we're trying to get the policy correct and then also the force design. And so those are the things that we're working on in the Pentagon from an Air Force kind of standpoint. We've received a lot of additional money and things from the Secretary. We're galvanizing movement from the Secretary, and we're making that headway. And I look forward to any questions you all have as we come up. I know we have some hot questions coming up, and I was told somebody had a hard ball they were going to throw, my way. So I'll make sure I have my glove out. But I'll turn it over to Sean.
Next up, thank you, General. Next up, we have Sean McCullough from SANS.
Good morning or afternoon, I guess. How you doing? So my name is Sean McCullough. I'm actually not an employee of SANS. I'm a SANS instructor and course author. I got to this point, spent 20 years at the National Security Agency in cyber operations. And I remember, 18, 19 years ago, when we sat down and we said, we probably should train people to do these operations jobs. And we just started from scratch. Taking that to now where we have schools and people invested and we think about the timeline and the long term for these, it's just fantastic to watch. And as a SANS instructor and a course author, I really focus on an individual student. How do I get a student who walks into the class on a Monday for them to be able to walk out on a Friday so that they can do their job better or have a different job, and how to implement that. And that takes a real different kind of approach than maybe teaching some other kind of skill, because not only do they have to learn knowledge while they're sitting down, but they have to get their hands on a keyboard. They have to operate. They have to move around. They have to try things that are going to break. And that's not always how a classroom is designed. And so being able to give people the skills so that when they walk out of the classroom, they can turn around and get on a keyboard and start doing something related to the job. That's kind of our goal in a SANS class. But then you all have to take it to the next step of how do I get them into a mission? How do I show them how to do my specific AOR and do that operations? And so SANS as a whole tries to coordinate and work together with organizations to get those the military service members to be able to do that kind of job. We've got training in for the Army and for the Air Force. We have things like service competitions, which are always fun to watch, because I'll walk into a room full of students and there's a bunch of civilians, and I can always tell where the service teams are working, not because of the haircut, but because they're always working together so well. They're coordinating, they're talking, they're collaborating, they're actually writing stuff down, which is, just doesn't happen with the rest of the civilians. And so it's always fun to watch that cohesiveness and that team player. So I'm excited to be here and to talk to y'all and also to listen to the folks on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. So for the folks here, you can empathize with the situation that the military, the instructors are dealing. Go to any company on the floor and you just ask them what the environment is like to hire, retain, reskill. It's so difficult. The challenges are fierce. So here we talk about the 30,000 gap here at DoD, and I'm curious from any of the panelists, what do you see that is going to change that status quo? I mean, everybody is going after the same things here. What have you seen, or what do you anticipate can change the status quo? Anyone on the panel?
I'll start. So 30,000 is a DoD problem, but this is a national problem, an international problem. And I think the solution to it is partnership, not competitive, right? Partnerships. So when we look at our total force, we look at military, all three components. We looked at all of our civilians, and then we look at our contractor workforce. In the DoD, we have about 225,000 people in the IT and cyber workforce. That's more than most companies on the floor. It's split about 1/3 each. So about a third contractors, a third mil, and a third civilian. So the only way we're going to solve this problem is if we partner together and attack this problem together. So when a situation happens that's a national crisis, we all come together to solve it. That's still not going to necessarily fix our shortage. So in order to fix our shortage, I think it's going to take a total national approach. And some of you may have been working on the Office of the National Cyber Director's strategy, which is going to come out here soon. And they're taking a national approach of how they're going to solve this. And then within DoD, we've published our workforce strategy. Hopefully everybody has seen that. If you haven't, it's based on 4 goals. So, 4 key pillars: identification, recruitment, development, and retention. And within those, we have 4 goals. And now we're going to be putting out an implementation plan here in the next, by summer, I'll say. We're almost there. It's out for court right now. In that implementation plan, we have about 21 objectives and about 41 specific tasks that we're going to try to accomplish. If you looked at our strategy from 10 years ago with those 4 pillars, they're about the same. And yet our problem has gotten worse. We foresee the demand increasing and supply decreasing. So we're going to have this gap. So doing what we've always done, even though the Pentagon doesn't have all the answers, isn't working. So we had to try new initiatives. And again, we don't have all those answers, so we're looking for that feedback. So we're proposing several kind of tasks to do out there that are revolutionary. Permeability, pay. My 8 friends out there don't like that one, but we'll get there. So to address this, though, we have to try some new things. And when you try something new and innovative, they don't always work. And we have to realize that that's okay, because what we're doing today is not working. So we're trying new and innovative ways to attack this problem. That starts with K through 12. We have to get our population interested and excited about STEM and about cyber. We have to go to non-traditional places to recruit talent. We have to change our hiring practices. We have to look at assessment-based hiring as well as what we consider assessment-based certification. So retention is not necessarily bad, but it's not necessarily good either. I don't want to retain everybody. I want to retain the best. How do I know? So an annual certification process. Can you do the mission is more important than how many certifications or how many degrees you have. So we really have to look at that, apprenticeships, partnerships with industry. I always said, I want the kid who's not doing so well in high school because he's spending his nights programming and making apps. That's the kind of person I think we want in cyber, right? I want to go after that accessible population, under diversity. Maybe that's on a spectrum, who can really, really focus, but probably can never pass one of our interviews. So how do we get that talent that we think would be very good in cyber? So I think we have to look at all approaches here. Those are just a couple of the ideas. Right?
Yeah, so I'll build on that. Personally, I'd like to take the coder that also gets straight A's, but we don't know if they're out there or not. I suspect they might be, but point well taken that folks that want to do this become really good at it. We met Gabe earlier today, right? I think we have to leverage what the tools that Congress gave us. I mean, cyber accepted service is pretty powerful. I don't know how many of you were ever employed after putting your resume on USA Jobs versus being employed from more current hiring opportunities. We have to be able to use those. I love the idea about apprenticeships and internships. One of the sticking points that we have with hiring civilians into the cyber warfighting community is you have to have a TSSCI clearance, and it takes a long time to get one. And people can't wait without being employed while the clearance process is working its way through the system, which it definitely needs to. We need the right folks cleared in order to execute operations. But if that takes 2 years, we're going to lose that highly talented individual while we wait for the process to work. But if we go deep and we look at internships and we bring folks to inside of our communities early, and we start the clearance process much earlier, then we'll be able to hire that person on as they graduate or as they finish their technical training. I also am a firm believer in the concept of building a pipeline. No one is a better recruiter than a talented and happy employee. If we bring someone into the force and we put them on mission early and they're knocking it out of the park, guess who they're talking to? The person that was in college with them or in their technical training or at the job that they just left. And they're going to reach back out to those other talented folks to encourage them to join this force where you have unique opportunities to execute very specific mission space. That's pretty powerful. We should leverage that. I'm with Mark. Not everybody that we bring onto the team needs to stay for 30 years. Some do. We absolutely need to develop leaders within the force. But I'll tell you, I'm perfectly okay with someone that joins the team for the right window of time, number of years, and then they leave. Because guess where they're going when they leave? They're going to defend our banking industry, our oil industry, you name it. And taking somebody that now understands what it means to operate as a team, that gets that team dynamic, that learns what it means to work alongside a host analyst, a network analyst, an intel analyst, and they're all doing things together, and they go off to the rest of society, our nation is better for it. Now, they have to stay on our team for long enough so that we derive that benefit, but you can do that when you've got an effective pipeline.
Thank you, General. Anyone else want to take? Yep.
Yeah, I
Sean?
actually jump on that because I actually came to NSA as an intern. I was a college student recruited in like early 90s. So the NSA did not have a giant booth like in the back. It was completely blank, and it was just somebody sitting at a table. It was very strange. But I probably wouldn't have known about it if I hadn't seen that booth and I hadn't gone through. And because I was an intern, I was able to get hired full time with that clearance, and that was a really big deal for me. I will say, I think it's really important that as a person goes through, my perspective of training, as they go through some set of training, whether it's 1 week, 6 weeks, the next day they need to be doing the job. I don't always see that in the commercial world too. Folks will come in, they'll take a class for whatever reason, and they're not doing the job. They're doing something completely different. And the training, they lose a lot of it. They may have some general knowledge, but they're not going to be able to get on the keyboard. And so I always, I'm in the cloud world nowadays, and my class is on cloud threat detection, and we try to build an environment that they can go home and spin up themselves to even do continued training. And I think as the rest of the world goes more and more into cloud environments, I think we're going to have more opportunities to create small training environments that people can do on their own time, in their own space, for a very particular purpose the day after they leave training. I'm really excited about that opportunity.
Thank you.
I'll throw out just a few things, and I agree. I mean, great comments, and I'm making notes here as well because I'm learning from the panel members as well. And I think that when I was at Joint Base Commander, the commander there, Joint Base Charleston, I would use this term map to success. What's the mission? How do we use the people, the airmen, and how do we get partnerships? And I think the key to map to success in this example is going to be the partnerships. Partnerships both internal into whatever workforce you're talking about, and also your partnerships external. On the internal partnership that we have inside the Air Force, we'll be talking about ways that we can partner with a part of the Air Force, again, so we can understand how our value is to that force and what specific things that we can do. And I'll give you some examples of some partnerships we had when I was at Scott Air Force Base. We set up the Midwest Cyber Center of Excellence. It was an organization that was a P4, kind of like this public-private partnership organization that we had a relationship with the community to determine what we needed. Under that program, we started a cyber apprentice program. We had and since Scott is right there on the border with Illinois and Missouri, we went and partnered with the Labor Department of Missouri and able to establish an apprenticeship program where we found kids and students that were out in the community. They paid for half of the salary from the Department of Labor, and then the employee paid the other half of the salary. And we were able to get people onboarded into those jobs, partnered with somebody who would train them, teach them, and then they would get the training, and at the end of that program, they would take their certification test, for an example. And we did that for a number of years that was there. The next step what we wanted to go to was be able to use the Midwest Cyber Center of Excellence to hold clearances. Like, how can you get those folks to come in early, inspire them to want to work in this kind of stuff, in this space, give them some examples and some partnerships with actual companies, and then also have a clearance that someone could hold to be able to get them the background and the things that they need, and then the partnership with the military to be able to offer them the jobs. At the time, where we hurt was having that cyber receptor service done where we could bring people on very quickly. And so now that we have those tools in place, I think those are partnerships that I would just throw out there that could be valuable to our community. At the time, you realize that there are jobs growing in this space every day. And we're going to be continually fighting for that same talent unless we begin to plant more seeds so those seeds can grow in 5 and 10 years from now. And that's going to take, I think, inspirational leadership. I think it's going to take the people who know what the nation needs to get out and talk about what the nation needs. And many of those people are sitting in this audience today. And so always when I go out and talk to audiences, I would encourage them and challenge them. What is your responsibility as an American who knows what's going on in this space? Many of you all have clearances, and you know what's going on. My mom does not, right? The folks that I have back in Tuskegee, Alabama, does not. But many of you all do. So what is your responsibility to get out into community, to start maybe nonprofits, to get out and talk to the Elks Clubs, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts as well. Also there, the Cyber Center of Excellence, we partner with the Boy Scouts to get a cyber badge as well. I mean, these are things that people who know, if you're in the know, then what's your responsibility to do something about it? So I would challenge you, as we look at these challenges internal to the workforce, inside the government, but also the value proposition that we have in this space, what can you do with whatever your circle of influence is, that you can go out and ask those folks what you can do, challenge those people, partner with them at every organization you in to talk about this space. We need more people talking about this. We need more people writing about it. But I would say that we need your support to ensure that America is going to remain secure in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, General. So we heard a lot about this morning about if we're going to win, it's the people component is important. We heard that from General Nakasone this morning. Mark talked about partnership. So just a shameless plug for AFCEA. AFCEA, the Cyber Committee, actually has a workforce subcommittee that's public-private that really tries to bring community to talk about a lot of the topics that are brought up on this panel. And so the follow-up question is, you talk about that paradox. You talk about some of the initiatives that you're engaging out in the public. Think 10 years from now, right? So you have fifth graders out there, the Signal Kids, right, tries to educate the community at that level about the opportunities. One of my heroes, Dr. Heath Jones, Jones Heath, she's the principal cyber advisor for the Air Force. Every time she speaks, she is inspirational.
She's my hero too. She's my hero too, so just everybody know.
Is she here?
It's right there. You didn't even know. It's right there.
I just
Why
heard
aren't
her
you
talk.
up here?
Come on up.
But getting leaders like that out in the public to inspire the next generation. So panelists, what can you see can the audience, industry, government, academia in partnership try to inspire that next generation? Anyone?
Yeah, so I'll take the first one again. So again, partnership, not competition, right? So how do we get there? I think we have to look at 3 areas. The first I'll cover is pay, right? The federal government at this point in time won't be as competitive with pay. So what do we have to look at? We have to look at our total compensation package. Most people don't realize all the other benefits that you get as a federal worker or as a military member, right? We have to advertise that. Part of that is we have to communicate what the job is. If anybody's read a PD or create a position description lately on the civilian side, it's 8 to 10 pages long. It's a bunch of speak, and you don't even know after reading it what the job is. So it's made for a different system that was designed in the 1950s to do classification to authorize the level of pay. So how do we get around that? We have to go to a paragraph, right? We have to speak the way industry speaks. We have to speak the way the kids, the young adults today speak. They want to know what they're going to be doing and the impact of that work. Impact is more important than pay. And at least in the department, we have great impact, right? Both on the mill side and the civ side and the contractor side. So you can go all 3. So we look at all 3 of those. So within the DoD, we have Title 10 authority under a cyber accepted service to pay target local market supplement, which is much higher pay than the current banded system. So we have options that we have to utilize. So the hard part is you have to transition the culture. So that's the second thing. How do we change the culture to embrace these new ways of doing business so we're not doing it the same way we've done it for 50 years, all right? Today, the workforce is changing out every 24 to 36 months. By the way, the technology is changing out faster than that. So how do you keep your workforce educated? How do you develop them? right? One method or one suggestion is to have annual assessments, right? Those assessments, can you still do your job? Have you improved in your job? Are you intermediate, basic, or advanced? And then pay accordingly. Or say you're not working out, right? That's the retention piece. So we don't have that in our system today. Same for interviewing, right? I mentioned some of the accessibility population that we're looking at. They can't pass an interview today. But if I give them an 8-hour cyber range and they can actually do the mission, why wouldn't I hire them? So we have to think about those kind of things and change the paradigm. And I think the third thing we have to look at is, at least in the department, we have to look at how do we partner with industry, how do we partner with schools, right? I attended a school conference about a year ago. They're desperately short teachers. We're short 30,000, probably just as many teachers out there. How do you keep a teacher at that salary without those incentives, vice going to industry? We need to partner together to make this happen. So how do we reach out to those populations and incentivize the younger generation today to be inspired and to know about options and opportunities, both in the private and the public sector, to defend this nation? So like General Nakasoli said today, cybersecurity is national security. Partnership, not competition.
Anyone else? Mark? Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I'll actually jump on that with the teachers. I know when I started in high school, my computer science teacher was learning a material 3 weeks before I was. And so, you know, I was able to gain some information, but I couldn't get the feeling of it. Like, what is exactly, why am I doing this? How can it be used? How can it be applied? And my kids nowadays, I got 4 kids, and they've been doing some level of computer science since middle school. They've been programming, and they've been able to kind of get a little bit more of a why am I doing this? How can I do things differently? How can I try this kind of thing out? And so I think being able to provide more support in the schools will help drive students to say, oh, this is something that's actually fun. Although my kid who's in computer science is worried that she'll be like me and just sit at a computer all day. I'm like, oh, that's fun though, but she doesn't want to do that. But you know, they can kind of get that feel of this is how I can take and use this in different ways. I think my reason I loved working in the government for the 20 years I was is because I could learn and do things I couldn't do anywhere else. I had time to research. I had time to learn new things, try stuff out. And as long as I think as we can continue to provide those opportunities to do something you can't do in the private sector, I think you're going to be able to retain and keep more people.
Yeah, I'd like to build on Sean's point about you know, going way deep down to our kids. What we're doing down at Fort Gordon is we've partnered with the superintendent of Columbia County Schools, Dr. Flint, to develop what we call a K-12 curriculum for a cyber citizen. This is for everybody. Like, everybody needs to know how this works. You don't necessarily need to be able to code the iOS or to write apps, but you should know how it works fundamentally if you are going to be a cyber citizen within society when you graduate. So what we did as technical experts from Fort Gordon is we went and sat down with the superintendent's curriculum development staff that are actually teachers that understand how to impart knowledge to kids. And we said, here are things that we think you should incorporate into your curriculum, starting all the way back in kindergarten. And they're fundamentally changing the curriculum for STEM in Columbia County schools. They're teaching things like logic. They're teaching things like the Internet of Things, but it's cooked into the curriculum. We launched this idea about a year ago with an inaugural meeting. They're taking the curriculum into a cluster of elementary, middle, and high school next year. So in the fall, when they kick off the calendar school year, they'll be teaching this curriculum. Why I think it's so critically important? It will expose our kids early on. Are you interested in this or not? If the first time that you ever tried to write code is when you're 18 years old, that's too late. We also need to remove the stigma. I drink a lot of Diet Mountain Dew, I don't eat Cheetos, and I don't live in my mom's basement. but I am a computer scientist. We got to remove that stigma so that more kids are interested in getting hooked. I got hooked in the 5th grade on an Apple IIc computer booted with a 5.5-inch floppy drive that had the basic programming language on it. And I wrote my first computer science program, and it worked. And it was the release of positive endorphins. I couldn't have articulated it like that back as a kid, but it actually worked. And I was like, hey, this is actually kind of cool. And not in a nerdy way. It's like legitimately cool. I took something that was an idea and turned it into functionality. Now think about a kid that's sitting in the 3rd grade that codes out some simple code and transmits it to the robot that moves around the room. That's how we hook our kids. And they get interested in it. And every one of them, through the K through 12 curriculum, graduates with some fundamental understanding about how to be a cyber citizen in the United States. Some subset of them are going to take an elective, and then they're going to join a Cyber Patriot team, and then they're going to get an internship so I can get them a secret classification early on so that I can hire them into the United States Army or into our civilian workforce when they graduate. This is not a pipe dream. This is real, courtesy of some folks that are investing time and energy to drive it. We're excited about the potential, and honestly, I think it's completely necessary to build our bench out sufficiently so that we end up with the right number of technical experts that eventually will be leading the cyber domain.
Thank you, General. General?
Yeah, I mean, I love this cyber citizen idea, right? And as you all were listening to that, I will ask you, if you are a parent or if you're a member who has any kind of relations with your school board, is to partner with the Army and find out what they've done. You don't have to reinvent this wheel. All you have to do is grab it and use it in your local community. We did the same thing. So Paul Kraft, who he knows there, when we stood up the Midwest Cyber Center of Excellence, we did a similar venture. We did that with the academic institutions that were there, but we did it with community colleges. At Scott Air Force Base at the time, they were transitioning from this kind of agricultural kind of area that, if you've been out there, you've seen the cornfields. Many of the mechanical areas that they had were going out of business, and we were growing, a cyber defense squadrons out there in the middle of these cornfields. And that area was not ready to be able to produce the type of workforce that we needed in the future. And so we began those kind of conversations about how you're going to grow, your understanding of what we need. And that led into a whole conversation about them changing their curriculum, but not necessarily always in their high school. And that was our next step, is to get there. As many of you all know, we have a simple supply and demand problem in America. Until we get at the supply, we're never going to be able to meet that demand. Our adversaries will force people into career fields or career areas that they need for their nation. We need to realize our value proposition, our way to be able to do that is to encourage, to expose, and to inspire. And that's not something that the military alone can do. We're going to need your help. And we're going to need you to talk about this more, because that is going to be the future of America. As you know, more things are going to be touching the network, and more things we're going to need to secure. That cannot be done by a military alone. And we're going to need to pull people from the rest of the community in our private sector and any company and business that some of you all work for. You need the same resources as well. So again, I love this cyber citizen piece, because it really gets at how do we get at the core part of the problem, which is the supply part. I think we can have partnerships with the Department of Education as well, and also with the Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce has a program now where they're bringing broadband, to some of these kind of rural areas of America that may not have had the exposure and opportunity to have broadband. And so if you look at it, the best program that we could probably be developing may be in the mountains or the valley or somewhere that doesn't have connectivity. We kind of experienced that during COVID, when we saw a lot of people did not have the bandwidth they needed to have their kids to be out doing outside in a virtual environment. And so the solution to that is getting people that are more connected, no matter where they are. From our recruiting numbers, we can no longer fish in the same fishing ponds. We're going to have to develop new ponds. We have to build roads and bridges to get to those ponds. But there are Americans who are out there who we need to tap into, that we need to get them connected, and then we need to, again, inspire those folks to be able to come into this business. Without that, then we're going to continue to have a supply problem, and we will continue to pull from all of this kind of community here, somebody coming off active duty, going to one company, jumping to another company, because we don't have the supply piece. So that's, to me, a long game. That is a stretch goal. But I think you as Americans will be here to help us to do that. And I want to make sure that you know you have a role to play. I have a role to play in my personal capacity as well to do it. And I will ask you to exercise your role. Thank you.
Thank you, General. So I think about the chapter out in Hawaii and some of the issues that you talk about, the supply issue, right? And so if the jobs are not there, I like your comment about the commerce being involved in part of the solution. If the jobs are not there, you do a great job in getting the kids inspired to go into these type, but if the jobs are not there in the communities that they want to serve in, it will be difficult to have a long-term, sustaining, enduring workforce. So if anyone has questions, you're welcome to go to it, but I'll entertain any questions from the audience. Anyone?
Ms. Jones-Heath will be the answer. You will answer the first question.
Go ahead, back in the back. Is there a mic?
I got you.
You're going to have to say your question. I'll repeat it.
Can everybody hear me? All right, so first I want to start off and say everyone should be cyber vigilant, right? It is everyone's responsibility to be cyber vigilant. Secondly, I want to ask a question to the panel to talk about the workforce development, right? We in Aberdeen Proving Grounds literally just did exactly what you guys are talking about, right? We had to figure out how to potentially mend the industry, which is contractors, which is us, the government, people who put out contractors, and then everyone else, right? Education, community, state, local governments, to figure out, hey, how do we build a pipeline, right? What does that pipeline look like, right? How do we take high school students, right, that may be interested, may already be working in STEM fields, and get those students into the right positions with the right people that have the right resources, right? Which in a lot of the times are defense contractors, right? That have those resources for those students to be able to excel, right? I'm a product of the best branch, the Army, Signal Corps, and going off of what I've learned from that branch, right, it's been good for me to start a business, right? Not everyone has had that same opportunity for those kids to be able to say, hey, I was able to go to a defense contractor, work as an intern on X project, but they can't get there and work on X project because the government won't lower those requirements for entry-level people on those contracts, right? You need to have 3 years of experience, Security Plus certification, associate's degree, and you need to understand these different types of principles of cybersecurity and or basic infrastructure needs. So really my question is like, hey, additional to what you just said, how do you work in each different state, local, county government to be able to build that solid pipeline of candidates?
How do you inspire industry to take the initiative if government's not there?
So through sweat equity, and I don't say that tongue in cheek. I think that leaders in local communities have a responsibility to effectively communicate with their local elected officials, with the industry partners that are outside the gates. There are a number of opportunities where professional societies bring together folks that are of the right industry partners, but you have to have the conversation. And then you have to be able to then translate it into an outcome. So what we do at Fort Gordon is we work with particular companies to sign into agreements that they will hire interns, that they will hire high school graduates for the very reasons that we're talking about, because they can then be incubators for things like clearances, for some of the technical collaboration that we are harnessing in and around and outside the gate. Part of my challenge now is that's great. That's in Augusta, Georgia. Beautiful place to live, by the way. But how do we now extend that beyond the immediate central Savannah River area and harness talent that exists in other places? And that is part of my responsibilities, to have informed conversations with senior mission commanders that are responsible for running other Army installations at other locations, to make sure that they're aware of some of the policies that have been put into place, hiring authorities that are relatively new. If the other installation commanders that are having similar conversations with the technical professionals in and around their installations don't know the availability of the options, then that's my fault. So we're having those conversations now.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll just add a little to it. So specifically for contractors, because we consider contractors as a partner in the total workforce. So we're working with Acquisitions and Sustainment, Office of Undersecretary of Defense, to help with the writing of those contracts, to limit the education requirements. Instead of having a PhD in order to do this job, you have to have this certification, or even we're also working with them on apprenticeship programs for younger talent, to bring in that younger talent as a contractor earlier, take some risks there to develop that talent over time. That's a new phenomenon, by the way. That's difficult to implement, but it starts with the top. We're trying to put that out. It's going to take a while to filter down and change those contracts over time to eliminate some of those harsh requirements of education and experience as the two main ones. So then how do you do the pay banding for that also is something we have to work through. But we are working through that.
We have time for a couple more questions before we close. Anyone with a question?
Yeah, two. One statement, one question.
Go ahead.
One statement, one question. You were talking about letting people know what we do. I think one of the biggest things I would recommend we continue to do is talk about what we can. When people ask what we do for cyber, I often point into like Darknet Diaries' Glowing Symphony story. And the more we can let people know what we do in the closed environments, the better. That really helps with recruitment. So that's the statement. The question, and I usually see this from junior officers, what is DoD's perspective on a cyber service?
Cyber certs.
No, cyber service to maintain retention for personnel.
I guess I'll take that one. So again, 225,000 people. Space Force is 8,000. So from a numbers perspective, I think we have enough for a cyber service. I think DoD is not, there's no official position on whether we support or don't support a cyber service. I'll just give you some pros and cons from my perspective. Alignment across all the components would be more easily attained through a cyber service. However, we also feel that cyber is like safety, is a responsibility across all components, across all people. They all have to have some basic cyber knowledge. So if you take away that from the components and the services specifically, then they adjudicate that responsibility then just to that service, and they say that cyber service's responsibility and not ours, when I think it's all of our responsibilities. Again, I go to partnership, not competition. I don't want to increase competition. I want to increase partnerships and have us all communicate together. So I didn't answer your question yay or nay. You're not going to get that answer out of DoD at this time. But we're working with the Hill and the committees on that specific question. And our job is to propose the pros and cons of that proposal.
So this is lightning round. Mark just gave his final closing. Sorry, Mark. We got time for 1 minute each. General, you want to start?
Hey, so I'll start, and really I just want to spend my 1 minute thanking AFCEA, thanking General Lawrence, thanking my wingman, Paul Fredenberg, and specifically I'm going to embarrass him for a second, but I want to thank my friend and mentor, Mr. Ron Pontius, who received a gold St. Isidore medal on stage earlier this morning, because this panel really evolved out of a symposium that he kickstarted down in Augusta of AFCEA CERTS, Cyber Education Research and Technology Symposium. And so, sir, it's a testimony to your continued legacy, and appreciate all your mentorship and what you personally have done for AFCEA.
Thank you, General.
Oh, just thanks. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for the invitation. And also, I will leave you with a challenge. I think Simon Sinek talks about the reason why, and how powerful understanding. Many Americans don't understand the reason why we need to invest in this area, but you do. So the people who are in the know, I would encourage you to be active, to be engaged in your community, to be able to influence the people that are surrounding you in whatever form that means, to educate them about the reason why and how important this business is for our nation's security. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Sean.
Yeah, I'll just say thanks for having me. I always excited when I go into a class to teach, and there is some or maybe all of the class is service members. They're ready to learn. They've got an important mission, and I always feel it's an honor to go in and help them through that. After 20 years being on the one side of being a practitioner, it's fun to be over there and showing how to do the next thing. So I definitely appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. So, AFCEA panelists, thank you so much for your time. Audience, you heard the message, calls to action. You're all bright lights out there. Thank you, AFCEA, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Please welcome back to the stage Brigadier General Paul Fredenberg, U.S. Army retired executive.
Hold on 1 second. Hey, look at, is Ron still here? Yeah, there he is. Hey, look at this. This is true. I want to echo Paul's comments. But this was, you started this. We did this in Augusta. We're going to make it bigger. But there is a cyber workforce track throughout this event. This is not the only panel. You can look at on the web, you can search it, and you can find all of those sessions that are talking about that. We talked about it in the commanders panel, the component cyber panel today. And I know you had a panel as well in the DoD theater. So this is an important subject. But Glenn, thank you. And for all the panel members joining us here today. So you all kind of touched on it, but it's people, it's processes, and technology, and they all have to be aligned to achieve the desired outcomes that General Nakasone talked about this morning. If one of those things is out of balance, we're not going to achieve the outcomes that we need. And so there are 3 legs of the stool that have to be addressed with equal rigor to get all these things aligned. So again, thank you. This concludes our plenary program, but hold on. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock, we're going to have the a fireside chat with the DoD CIO, Mark's boss, and he's going to be there, and our CEO, Susan Lawrence. You can find the details for the rest of tomorrow's show in your TechNet Cyber app, so be sure to download this. And now, maybe even more important, I want to remind you that we're having a networking reception immediately following this in the exhibit hall, supported by our great sponsors, Carasoft, Ciena, Comcast Business, Fortinet Federal, and Peraton. So go thank them for those drinks that you're going to have in the networking reception. Make new friends and solve some of our workforce problems while you're out there having a drink. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.